The evening had begun like any other in the glittering high-rise district of New York City, where the streets below shimmered with golden reflections of skyscraper lights. The prestigious Leighton Manor, home to the Leighton family fortune, was alive with the murmur of chandeliers swaying slightly above, the clinking of crystal glasses, and the rustle of expensive fabrics brushing against polished floors. Tonight, the family was hosting a high-profile dinner meant to impress investors, socialites, and influential business figures. Among the guests was a young man named Alexander Alex Leighton, the heir apparent of the Leighton conglomerate. And he was every bit the embodiment of privilege: sharp suits, tailored shoes, a confident smile that hid entitlement behind charm. Yet, despite his charm, Alex possessed the arrogance of someone who had always had the world bend to his whims. Meanwhile, in a quiet corner of the room, there was a presence that few noticed at first glance: a woman named Maya Brooks. Maya, dressed impeccably in a subtle yet elegant gown, carried herself with poise that demanded attention, though she didn't seek it. Her eyes, sharp and discerning, observed the crowd with a clarity that most would mistake for modesty. At first, the other guests assumed she was an assistant, perhaps a consultant, maybe even someone's plus one. But Maya's mind was elsewhere, focused on her mission for the evening. She wasn't here to impress socialites or to mingle for the sake of gossip. She was here to conduct business. You see, Maya Brooks was far more than a bystander in this opulent world. She was the quiet force behind the very empire that Alex Leighton's family took for granted. Through years of strategic acquisitions, silent investments, and sheer business genius, Maya had accumulated control over the Leighton conglomerate without ever revealing her identity. Tonight, she was here not only as an investor, but as the silent overseer of a fortune Alex believed was entirely his. As the dinner commenced, the room buzzed with polite conversation, laughter echoing across the vaulted ceilings. Alex, exuding the self-confidence of someone accustomed to attention, spotted Maya near the hors d'oeuvres table. To him, she seemed just another woman navigating a world of wealth she had yet to inherit. Perhaps it was her composed demeanor or her simple, understated beauty, but something about her drew his eye, and more importantly, his ego, in a way only a person of privilege can manage. Alex approached Maya with a charming yet condescending smile, expecting compliance and admiration in return. "You know," he began, leaning slightly, "it's rare to see someone dressed like that at these events. Most people here are either desperate or fake." His tone carried the weight of superiority, a subtle jab meant to assert dominance in the room. Maya, unfazed, turned in with a polite smile, one that did not betray any irritation. "I suppose appearances can be deceiving," she replied calmly, her voice smooth and deliberate. There was a hint of a challenge in her words, though Alex didn't notice. He was too busy reveling in the performance of social power he had mastered over years of privilege. "Oh, I like that," he said, chuckling lightly. "Confidence. But don't get me wrong, most of the people here wouldn't know genuine success if it hit them in the face." The remark, though subtle, carried a slight barb aimed to assert his superiority over anyone who might compete with his social standing. Maya's eyes flickered, catching the faint glimmer of arrogance that Alex so freely exuded. She had encountered people like him before, entitled, overconfident, dismissive of those they deemed beneath them. But unlike most, Maya wasn't intimidated. In fact, she found his ignorance almost amusing, like watching a child believe they had mastered a game far beyond their comprehension. "Interesting," she said softly. "I always find it fascinating when people equate volume with influence. The louder someone speaks, the less they often understand." The words were subtle, but they carried a weight that Alex failed to grasp. He assumed her statement was merely a clever retort, perhaps an attempt at flirtation, and laughed it off. "You've got a sharp tongue. I like that. Though, I bet you don't often win arguments against people like me," he said, leaning closer, his tone flirting dangerously with arrogance. It was at this precise moment that the tension in the room escalated. Alex, emboldened by the silence and attention of the small crowd around them, decided to humiliate Maya publicly. He raised his voice just enough for the nearby guests to hear, pointing towards a delicate glass of red wine she had just picked up. "Honestly, I don't even know why you're at these dinners. You can't possibly understand the stakes here. Some of us were born into this, and some of us He let the words trail, letting a patronizing glance sweep across her face. Well, some of us try to play at it and fail spectacularly. The crowd laughed lightly, mistaking Alex's arrogance for wit. Maya felt a pang, not of embarrassment, for she was rarely rattled, but of recognition that Alex was about to make a grave mistake. Maya's response was deliberate. She smiled, but it was not a smile of submission. It was a smile of quiet power. "I see," she replied softly, her voice now commanding enough to draw the attention of everyone near them. "So you assume I'm here to fail because I'm not like you?" That's a common assumption among people who never question what they think they know. But assumptions, as you'll discover, often have consequences. There was an audible pause in the room, the air thickening with curiosity. Alex, mistaking the pause for awe at his wit, leaned in further, ready to deliver the final blow to cement his superiority. Before he could speak again, Maya reached into her clutch and casually retrieved a sleek, gold-embossed business card, placing it before him on the polished table. The word shimmered under the chandelier's light. Maya Brooks, CEO, Brooks Capital Holdings. A faint gasp echoed from nearby guests as Alex's confident expression faltered, the veneer of arrogance cracking just enough for uncertainty to seep in. Maya's eyes locked with his, unwavering, and she said, "Perhaps you didn't realize, Mr. Layton, that the empire you assume is yours is, in fact, partially under my stewardship. I own significant shares in every major division your family boasts about." The realization hit Alex like a tidal wave. The very foundations of his self-importance trembled as he tried to process her words. The woman he belittled, humiliated, was a very person who held sway over the future of his family's fortune. A tense silence blanketed the room, punctuated only by the faint clinking of silverware. For the first time in his life, Alex felt powerless. His charm, his upbringing, his entire identity built around privilege. All of it seemed fragile in the presence of someone who wielded true influence quietly, without theatrics, without arrogance. Maya's smile softened, but it carried no warmth. Instead, it radiated authority and quiet judgment. "You see, Mr. Layton, influence isn't inherited. It's earned. And sometimes the people who appear to be beneath you are the ones who can decide whether your empire thrives or crumbles." With that, she turned gracefully, leaving him standing in stunned silence as the crowd murmured, eyes darting between the heir of a dynasty and the woman who had just upended his entire sense of superiority. Alex's mind raced. For the first time, he realized that wealth, titles, and social status meant nothing if paired with arrogance and ignorance. That night marked a turning point, not just for Alex, but for the Layton legacy itself. The lesson, though subtle, was powerful. Never underestimate someone who operates in silence, and never assume your privilege shields you from accountability. Maya had not sought to humiliate him in return. She had only revealed the truth, but the truth, as Alex would soon learn, had the power to alter lives, careers, and empires alike. The next morning, the grand halls of the Layton Manor were quiet, almost eerily so. The chandeliers reflected the pale light of dawn through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors. For most of the family, it was another routine day filled with meetings, calls, and high-level business decisions. But for Alexander Layton, nothing could feel normal. The confrontation with Maya the previous evening replayed incessantly in his mind like a relentless echo. Her calm demeanor, her poised words, and most importantly, her revelation that she controlled parts of the empire he had assumed were entirely his, had unsettled him more profoundly than he cared to admit. Alex wandered the halls aimlessly, his tailored suit impeccable, yet his usually confident posture slightly slouched, betraying an unusual vulnerability. He had spent his entire life basking in the comfort of privilege, where money and connection solved nearly every problem. He had been untouchable, or so he had believed. But Maya Brooks had shattered that illusion with a simple smile and a business card. The idea that someone he had publicly humiliated held the power to affect his life, his reputation, and the future of his family's conglomerate was a bitter pill he couldn't swallow easily. His parents, oblivious of the subtle but seismic shift occurring in their son, were engrossed in morning discussions about stock movements, mergers, and philanthropic commitments. Their voices carried authority, Yet Alex barely heard them. In truth, he didn't know how to process the situation. Pride, always his guiding compass, was warring against an unfamiliar emotion: fear. Fear that the world didn't automatically bend to his will. Fear that his arrogance had real consequences. Meanwhile, Maya had returned to her own domain, a sleek office in downtown Manhattan that overlooked the city's bustling streets. Her office, minimalist yet elegant, reflected her personality: precise, efficient, and quietly commanding. From this vantage point, Maya could watch the movements of the city's elite, always calculating, always strategizing. Unlike Alex, she understood the subtle dynamics of power, not the kind flaunted at a glittering dinner, but the kind that operated quietly, invisibly, and decisively. The fact that she had revealed herself to Alex so publicly was a calculated decision. She didn't need to flaunt power. She needed him to recognize it, to understand that influence was earned, not inherited, and that his assumptions could be dangerous. For Alex, the next few days were a torment of reflection. He attended meetings, conferences, and dinners, all with forced smile and hollow laughter, while internally grappling with a truth he had never known. Money alone did not equal respect. He thought about the way he had spoken to Maya, the condescending tone he had taken, the public humiliation he had inflicted. And unlike the previous times in his life when an apology could erase minor embarrassments, this situation was far more precarious. Maya was not only intelligent and assertive, she was formidable. And worst of all, she wasn't someone he could charm, manipulate, or intimidate. She was in control in a way he had never experienced. Driven by both curiosity and desperation, Alex began to research her, digging through business journals, investment records, and subtle mentions in industry reports. Each discovery deepened his shock. Maya Brooks wasn't just an investor, she was a visionary. Her company, Brooks Capital Holdings, controlled significant stakes in real estate, tech startups, and even some of the more lucrative divisions of the latent conglomerate. The sheer scale of her influence made Alex realize how little he actually understood about the world he thought he ruled. For the first time, he confronted the uncomfortable truth that his knowledge of business was superficial, built on nepotism and assumption rather than skill or insight. In a desperate attempt to regain a sense of control, Alex tried to reach out to Maya. He sent an email, carefully crafted to sound both conciliatory and professional. The message was polite, yet it carried a faint undercurrent of ego he couldn't quite suppress. Ms. Brooks, I hope this message finds you well. I wanted to thank you for your insights at the dinner the other night. I would appreciate the opportunity to discuss potential collaborations. I look forward to hearing from you. Hours passed with no reply. Then days. Alex began to understand a vital lesson about power. It isn't given, and it isn't demanded. It is respected or ignored entirely. Maya's silence was not just deliberate. It was a subtle test, a measure of his patience, humility, and willingness to approach her on her terms rather than his own. At the Layton family offices, the tension was palpable. Alex's usual bravado had been replaced by a nervous energy that those around him noticed but did not comment on. Employees whispered about the young heir's unusual behavior. His colleagues noticed him staring off into space during meetings, scribbling notes furiously, and pacing the offices after brief phone calls. There was a sense that something had shifted fundamentally in the dynamics of power at the heart of the family empire. Maya, on the other hand, was orchestrating her own subtle interventions. She began attending meetings where her investments intersected with the latent conglomerate, always in the background, never announcing herself overtly. Her presence, even when unseen, influenced decisions. Alex began noticing patterns, subtle shifts in strategy, and outcomes he hadn't anticipated. Projects he assumed would sail through under his direction were being quietly reassessed. Proposals he submitted for approval were met with unexpected scrutiny. Each time, he felt Maya's invisible hand guiding decisions in ways that tested both his competence and his humility. The turning point came when a critical project, the expansion of a major real estate portfolio, was brought to Alex for approval. Confident in his knowledge and authority, he rushed through the proposal, presenting it to the board with all the usual flair. However, to his astonishment, the board was not impressed. They had been briefed in advance by Maya, who had meticulously reviewed every detail, ensuring that every oversight was highlighted. Alex felt the sting of embarrassment as his suggestions were questioned, challenged, and ultimately overridden. For the first time, he felt the crushing weight of accountability, without the shield of wealth or family name. That evening, Alex returned to his apartment, exhausted and unsettled. He sat alone, reflecting on the lessons that had been unfolding. He had always believed in the supremacy of his social standing, the inevitability of his inheritance, and the unquestionable rightness of his decisions. Maya had dismantled that illusion, forcing him to confront a painful truth. Arrogance is fragile, and ignorance can be catastrophic. The young heir, who had once assumed that his charm and status could conquer any challenge, was now forced to reconsider the very foundation of his identity. Meanwhile, Maya observed all of this with quiet satisfaction. She did not seek vengeance, nor did she relish humiliation for its own sake. Her objective was far more sophisticated: to instill humility, foster growth, and if possible, identify whether Alex possessed capacity to learn from his mistakes. She had witnessed countless individuals with privilege squander their opportunities because they were blind to their own limitations. Alex's arrogance had been no exception, but in him, she saw something intriguing, a spark, however faint, a potential if tempered with wisdom and respect. Over the next weeks, Maya's subtle lessons continued. She introduced minor challenges, situations where Alex had to think critically, collaborate, and accept guidance rather than dictate outcomes. With each encounter, Alex's frustration grew, but so did his self-awareness. Slowly, the veneer of entitlement began to crack, revealing a side of him capable of learning, adapting, and even recognizing the value of others. It was an arduous process, often humbling and sometimes painfully slow, but Alex had no choice but to engage. By the end of this period, Alex had transformed not entirely, but significantly. He was more cautious, more considerate, and increasingly aware of the invisible forces shaping the empire he believed he controlled. And though he would never admit aloud, he had developed a grudging respect for Maya Brooks, the woman he had once humiliated without realizing that she was the very architect of the empire he sought to command. Little did he know, Maya's plans were only beginning. The lessons of humility, patience, and accountability were crucial, but the final test, the one that would challenge Alex's character, courage, and moral compass, was still to come. And when it arrived, neither Alex nor anyone in the Layton family would be prepared for the storm of revelations that Maya had quietly been orchestrating all along. The city skyline shimmered as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, golden shadows across the streets of Manhattan. Inside the towering glass walls of Brooks Capital Holdings, Maya Brooks sat at her sleek, minimalist desk, reviewing a series of proposals from the Layton conglomerate. Every decision, every document, every project bore subtle traces of her influence. Yet for all her control, tonight's focus was singular: Alexander Layton. The man who had humiliated her at the dinner, the man who still clung to arrogance despite clear evidence of her power, was about to face a test unlike any other. Maya had been observing Alex closely for weeks. She had seen him stumble through meetings, struggle to navigate situations he once assumed he could dominate effortlessly, and wrestle internally with the reality of his limitations. But she had also glimpsed something rare: potential. Beneath the arrogance and entitlement, there existed a mind capable of learning, a will that could adapt, and, perhaps most importantly, a heart that, if properly guided, could understand responsibility and respect. Her plan was not to crush him. It was to refine him, to confront him with challenges that would reveal the true measure of his character. The opportunity came sooner than expected. A small community project, one Alex had initially dismissed as insignificant, became the perfect proving ground. Maya had quietly acquired control of the funding for the initiative, ensuring that Alex would be the one responsible for its execution. It involved renovating a neglected urban housing complex, providing resources for local families, and managing a team of professionals who were highly skeptical of his abilities. In short, it was a situation that demanded humility, collaboration, and leadership, qualities Alex had yet to demonstrate consistently. When Maya first informed him of the assignment, Alex's reaction was a mixture of surprise and indignation. "Why me?" he asked, his voice carrying a subtle edge of entitlement. This isn't exactly the kind of project that builds an empire. It's charity work. Maya's response was calm, yet sharp, leaving no room for argument. You are in charge because you need to understand the consequences of leadership beyond boardrooms and balance sheets. Influence isn't about titles or wealth. It's about action, judgment, and the ability to navigate real human challenges. You will lead this project, Mr. Layton. Failure is an option you cannot afford if you intend to reclaim the credibility you've jeopardized. Alex bristled at her words, but there was a kernel of understanding that he could not ignore. He realized that this was no ordinary assignment. It was a test, a mirror reflecting his flaws and forcing him to confront them directly. Reluctantly, he agreed, masking his trepidation with his usual bravado. From the first day on site, Alex encountered challenges he had never anticipated. The housing complex was more deteriorated than any report had indicated. Leaking roofs, crumbling walls, outdated plumbing, and residents who had long since lost faith in empty promises. The community was wary of his presence, seeing him as just another entitled outsider trying to play savior. Many openly questioned his competence, and some even mocked him behind his back. For Alex, the situation was humbling. He had spent his life in environments where appearances mattered more than substance. But here, in the middle of genuine hardship, superficiality held no weight. He had to act or risk failure. Maya, observing from a distance, orchestrated subtle interventions. She arranged for mentors to guide him, community leaders to challenge him, and professionals to question his decisions. Each obstacle was carefully designed to test his patience, empathy, and problem-solving skills. Alex found himself facing dilemmas that money alone could not resolve. Negotiating with distrustful tenants, mediating disputes among staff, and navigating bureaucratic hurdles that required diplomacy, not arrogance. One particular day marked a pivotal moment. A water pipe had burst in one of the older buildings, flooding several apartments. Residents were panicked, and contractors were hesitant to take responsibility. Alex felt a familiar surge of frustration, the instinct to delegate and command, but he realized that traditional methods would fail here. Remembering Maya's lessons, he rolled up his sleeves and joined the team in the flooded hallways, helping move furniture, coordinating emergency repairs, and offering reassurance to families who had every reason to distrust him. By the end of that grueling day, Alex was physically exhausted but mentally transformed. He began to understand that leadership was not about asserting dominance, but about taking responsibility, making sacrifices, and earning trust. The experience revealed a side of him that had rarely been exercised, a capacity for humility, compassion, and practical problem-solving. Meanwhile, Maya's observation of Alex shifted subtly. She noticed the changes, the way he listened more than he spoke, the way he sought advice rather than giving orders, the genuine concern in his interactions with the community. It was not perfection, but it was progress, and it demonstrated that her strategy was effective. She allowed herself a faint, approving smile, knowing that the most crucial part of the test, the internal transformation, was underway. Yet Maya's ultimate test was still to come. She understood that knowledge and empathy alone would not suffice. Character would be measured most effectively under pressure, when personal stakes collided with ethical decisions. She decided to escalate the situation by introducing a financial crisis within the project. One of the contractors had mismanaged funds, threatening to derail the entire renovation. Alex was faced with a choice: cover up the mismanagement, shift blame, and protect his reputation, or confront the mistake, admit responsibility, and navigate the fallout transparently. The decision weighed heavily on him. His instinct, shaped by years of privilege, was to deflect and conceal. But he remembered Maya's words from their first confrontation. Influence is earned, not inherited. Summoning every ounce of courage, Alex chose transparency. He called an emergency meeting, explained the situation honestly to the board, coordinated a solution to recover mismanaged funds, and worked alongside the team to ensure that the project continued without delay. His actions surprised many, including contractors, the board, and even some of the more skeptical community members. By owning the mistake and guiding the team to the resolution, Alex demonstrated the growth Maya had been nurturing all along. The climax of the test came when a particularly resistant resident confronted him directly. Mrs. Thompson, an elderly woman whose apartment had been severely affected by the flooding, was initially hostile. distrustful of any promises. "You're just like the rest of them," she said sharply, her voice trembling with frustration. "You think a suit and a smile will fix everything. We've seen plenty like you come and go. Why should we believe you're any different?" Alex met her gaze, steady and sincere. For the first time, he spoke not as a wealthy heir, not as an entitled man accustomed to obedience, but as someone accountable and invested in tangible outcomes. "Because I have to be different," he replied earnestly. "I can't promise to undo all the hardships of the past, but I can promise that I'll work with you, listen to you, and make sure your voice is part of the solution. I won't leave until we get this right." Mrs. Thompson studied him for a long moment. Slowly, her expression softened, and she nodded. "Actions, not words," she said quietly. "I'll be watching." That interaction, brief yet profound, marked a turning point. Alex realized that true leadership, respect, and influence were earned not through arrogance, wealth, or social position, but through integrity, action, and empathy. As the weeks passed, the community project continued successfully. Alex had transformed from a superficial, entitled young man into someone capable of genuine leadership. And through it all, Maya watched silently, ensuring that each lesson was absorbed, each misstep corrected, and each triumph acknowledged. By the time the project reached completion, Alex had not only gained practical skills and respect from the community, but he had also undergone a personal metamorphosis. Maya's final evaluation of Alex came in a private meeting at her office. She looked at him steadily, her expression unreadable, and said simply, "You've come a long way, Alexander, but the true test isn't over yet. The world you'll inherit, if you're ready, demands more than competence. It demands character, courage, and humility to recognize that no one is above accountability, not even those born into wealth." Alex nodded, understanding at last the full magnitude of her guidance. "I see that now," he admitted quietly. I underestimated you, and I've underestimated the responsibility that comes with what I have." Maya's lips curved into the faintest of smiles, approval flickering in her eyes. She had tested him, pushed him and challenged him, and he had emerged transformed, not fully perfected, but fundamentally changed. And yet, the final chapter, the revelation that would truly upend the balance of power and redefine both their lives, was still to come. The community project had reached its final stages. The once neglected housing complex now gleamed with freshly painted walls, repaired plumbing, and well-maintained communal spaces. Families who had once despaired now walked the halls with renewed hope. Children played in safe courtyards, neighbors exchanged smiles, and the local leaders openly acknowledged the dedication and hard work of the team. Alexander Layton, once the arrogant heir who had humiliated Maya Brooks without a second thought, now stood at the heart of this transformation, exhausted but undeniably changed. For weeks, he had navigated challenges he had never imagined: mismanaged funds, skeptical residents, demanding contractors, and unforeseen setbacks that tested not only his patience but his very character. With each trial, he had been forced to rely on teamwork, empathy, and transparency, qualities he had previously dismissed as unnecessary in a life cushioned by wealth and privilege. Maya had orchestrated every obstacle carefully, observing from a distance, occasionally intervening, but never offering him shortcuts. She wanted him to discover, through experience, the difference between inherited status and earned respect. Now, standing in the center of the courtyard during the final ribbon-cutting ceremony, Alex felt a profound shift within himself. He understood for the first time the weight of responsibility and the power of humility. He realized that influence could not be assumed. It had to be earned through action, integrity, and the acknowledgement of one's limitations. His speeches were no longer polished displays of entitlement, but heartfelt words that resonated with authenticity. As the ceremony concluded and the crowd began to disperse, Maya approached him, her presence calm and commanding. Alex turned to face her, feeling a mixture of gratitude, awe, and lingering embarrassment. I can't thank you enough," he admitted, his voice unsteady. "Not just for the project, but for everything. I never realized what I didn't know. I thought I understood leadership, responsibility, life, but I was wrong. I see now how much I've taken for granted, and how much I still have to learn." Maya's expression softened, but her tone remained firm. Alexander, change is never easy, especially when it comes to unlearning arrogance. What you've learned here is only the beginning. True leadership doesn't come from wealth or birthright. It comes from accountability, empathy, and the courage to confront your own shortcomings. But there's one final truth you need to understand. Alex's heart raced. He had already endured weeks of challenges. Yet the way she spoke suggested there was more, something that could potentially overturn everything he thought he knew about the world and himself. What truth is that? He asked cautiously. Maya reached into her bag and pulled out a sleek folder. Inside were documents, contracts, and shareholder records, proof of something Alex had never imagined. She handed the folder to him. You see, Alexander, the empire you've assumed is entirely yours isn't. Parts of it have been under my control for years. I've invested, acquired shares, and managed divisions without your family even realizing it. That includes critical sectors of your conglomerate, real estate, technology, and a few key international ventures. Alex's eyes widened as he scanned the documents. Each line, each figure, each ownership stake confirmed what Maya had said. His mind raced, struggling to reconcile the truth of the arrogance he had clung to for so long. He had humiliated her, underestimated her, and assumed dominance, all while she quietly held the power to shape the very empire he had taken for granted. Maya continued, her voice steady, unwavering. I revealed myself at the dinner not to shame you, but to teach you a lesson. Influence is not about entitlement. Wealth is not proof of competence. And arrogance is often the downfall of those who believe they are untouchable. I wanted you to experience the consequences of your assumptions, to understand the value of humility, and to see the true meaning of leadership. Alex swallowed hard, the weight of realization pressing down on him. For the first time, he felt small, not insignificant, but human, vulnerable, and capable of growth. I understand, he said quietly, and I see now that I have a long way to go. I treated you unfairly, arrogantly, and he hesitated, searching for words worthy of the moment. I misjudged you completely. You didn't just teach me about business, you taught me about life. Maya's eyes softened. Alexander, what matters now is not the past, but what you do with this knowledge. You have a choice. Continue the cycle of entitlement or step into true leadership, guided by humility and responsibility. The decision is yours. The gravity of her words sank in. Alex realized that this was more than a personal lesson. It was a turning point for the latent conglomerate itself. With Maya's guidance, he could rebuild trust, strengthen the company, and genuinely earn the respect of those who had once doubted him. But he also recognized that his growth had to be authentic. Any pretense of transformation would be exposed, and the consequences could be catastrophic. Over the following months, Alex began implementing the lessons he had learned. He approached business decisions with transparency, consulted experts rather than relying solely on inherited advice, and engaged with employees, partners, and communities in ways that reflected genuine respect. Maya remained a silent yet guiding force, ensuring that his growth continued without overshadowing his personal agency. Slowly, Alex's reputation transformed, from an entitled heir to a competent, thoughtful leader who understood the weight of his responsibilities. The Leighton family, initially skeptical of his transformation, observed the changes with cautious optimism. Employees who had whispered doubts now spoke of renewed trust and respect. Communities that had once seen the conglomerate as distant and indifferent began to recognize its potential for positive impact. And through it all, Alex maintained a humble acknowledgement of the lessons Maya had imparted. One evening, as the city skyline glittered once again beneath the stars, Alex met Maya in a quiet garden terrace overlooking the river. The air was cool, fragrant with the scent of evening blooms, and the world seemed momentarily suspended between past mistakes and future possibilities. I never imagined I'd be standing here like this, Alex said, his voice sincere. I've learned more in the past few months than I did in decades of privilege. You changed everything, not just for me, but for everyone who depends on this empire. Maya regarded him thoughtfully. Transformation is never instant. It's a process of recognizing your flaws, embracing responsibility, and striving to do better. You've taken the first steps. Now, it's up to you to continue walking the path. Alex nodded, a newfound determination shining in his eyes. I will, and I owe you more than I can ever express. Maya smiled faintly, a rare warmth in her expression. The world doesn't need repayment, Alexander. It needs leaders who understand that influence is earned, not assumed. You've shown the capacity to be that leader. The rest is up to you. As the night deepened, Alex looked out over the city, the lights reflecting both the magnitude of the empire he had inherited and the potential for the future he could now shape. For the first time, he understood that true power lay not in wealth or titles, but in character, integrity, and the ability to learn from one's mistakes. In that moment, the lessons of the past, humiliation, challenge, and transformation, coalesced into clarity. Maya had not merely exposed his flaws, she had unlocked his potential. The empire, once assumed to be his by birthright, was now a canvas for genuine leadership, guided by wisdom and humility. And for Alex Layton, the man who had once humiliated a woman he thought powerless, the revelation was profound. The true measure of success was not in dominance, but in respect, responsibility, and the courage to grow. The dinner, the confrontation, the weeks of testing, all of it culminated in a single truth. The strongest empires are built not on arrogance, but on character. And in the partnership forged through challenge and revelation, both Maya and Alex had reshaped the future, proving that even the highest towers of wealth and privilege can be elevated further when tempered by integrity, empathy, and wisdom.